Hi, Heartlit artists. Welcome to today's studio session. Today, I have something a little different and special for you. I'm talking to my friend, Steve Puttrich. Steve and I actually just met for the first time officially a few minutes ago, but I've been following Steve online for many years. And actually, I have one of his paintings hanging in my living room. And Steve, I wanted to thank you as well for the Christmas card. So thank you.
Oh yeah.
That was a
Okay.
delight. And of
Good.
course, like most watercolor artists, as soon as I pulled it out, I'm like, how did he do that? And you get in really close to try to see all the little details. So yeah, thank you. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Steve, tell us a little bit about you and your art and where you're from and yeah, what you do.
Yeah. I'm Steve Puttrich from the Chicago area. My wife and I live in Arlington Heights. I'd say I painted, drew, sketched, whatever you want to say, since a young age. I've had two really encouraging parents. They saw that I had a drive for art and they encouraged me left and right all through high school. They asked my high school teacher, where should we send him to college? And he recommended the American Academy of Art in Chicago. This was in the early 80s. Graduated there with a fine arts degree as well as a graphic arts degree. Right out of college, I got an architectural illustration job with an engineering company, and I was with them for about 35 years, painting, sketching, creating these proposals of projects all around the world. I got to paint pretty much 8 hours a day for about 25 years. In the late 90s, we switched over to computers and we got into the 3D modeling and animation, video, a lot of Photoshop, a lot of After Effects. So I have that 3D modeling and animation background that often helps with visualizing forms, planes, and shapes. After about 2003, I got promoted to management. My wife, in her wisdom, said, Steve, you're not painting it anymore. You're not creating. So, about 2003, we bought a lot of the plein air equipment. That whole plein air genre, I would say, hadn't yet taken off, but it started to. Wherever Parsons Engineering sent me on a management trip, we would go a day ahead and paint. I was in management meetings. My wife was painting along with me, and then we would stay usually a day later and paint more. I thoroughly enjoyed the painting part of those trips, and we came back with a lot of art. So I kept up with the art in the weekends and evenings, but my day job kind of ended after about 2016. Parsons and I kind of parted ways because I had been painting that whole time. I picked up a nice teaching assignment with the Palette and Chisel Academy of Art in Chicago. It's the second oldest art club in America. First one is the Salmagundi Club in New York, and then the Palette and Chisel in Chicago. And I've been teaching watercolor painting at the Palette and Chisel from about 2016. Been teaching online classes, one-on-one classes. It's been fun. I love teaching painting, the art of painting, both in oil as well as watercolor. I love both. It's been a great career. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I love that you've made art your career from the very beginning. I think when I was young, I didn't know if that was doable. Maybe that was partly because we lived in a very rural area. And so you don't know any artists. And so nowadays, I think it's more possible to have an art career than it ever was before.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, totally.
everything is visual now. If you're a business, you need design. So there's a really good place to get started for many people.
Yeah, well, this is our studio. My
Yeah,
wife
your
and I,
wife is an artist as well, you said.
she is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met back in 1980. We had life drawing class together. I was a painfully shy student. I never had a girlfriend. Didn't speak to the other sex. So I was really intimidated. She sat in my life drawing class, and the minute I saw her, I fell in love with her. And
Mhm.
it took about 6 months for me to work up the courage to actually speak with her. We eventually got off to the right foot.
Yeah, my husband's one of those guys who didn't talk to girls either, and he loved cars. So we would probably have never crossed paths if
Oh,
yeah, something hadn't intervened. So, but yeah, I love that you were able to travel and paint together. I find that when we travel, we mostly spend our time in looking, and then I to go home. And I mean, I've been a studio painter because I go home and interpret everything in the studio.
yeah.
Both are possible.
Yeah, absolutely. We're heading down to Florida. I'm teaching at the Plein Air South in the middle of March. Plein Air South is a nice, really nice conference of about 50 to 150 artists. This year they're keeping it short,
Mhm.
small. So 50 artists, about 13 faculty are going down there, and I'm one of the faculty that will be teaching the
Mhm.
50 students. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
a nice break.
yeah, that would be a nice group size. A lot of my students are often a little intimidated by plein air painting. I think we tend to worry about, people seeing us and then just the challenges of, packing everything up and getting out there. Do you have any tips for getting over that hurdle or?
Yes, I'm actually teaching a gentleman who is a former student of mine. We met up in Door County at the Peninsula School of the Art. I was teaching a class workshop up there in watercolor. This gentleman worked at an engineering firm for 35 years, quit his job on Friday, came to my class on Monday wanting to learn to paint. He had this attitude of, hey, one day I'm going to die. Let's live this adventure. He had the right attitude for painting, not just watercolor, which is, you know, a really difficult medium with the wrong attitude, I'll say.
With that desire to control, where I
Yes,
think is
yes.
what it is really.
And
Yeah.
and being an engineer, he had a lot of control, but he had the right attitude as far as just cutting loose and just going for it. And I'm mentoring him now in oil painting. So he's wanting to learn to oil paint and actually plein air paint. So I encouraged him to sign up for some of these local events that are happening. He's put pen to paper, signed up, and is committed to learn how to do plein air painting
Probably
without
join.
really knowing how to do it.
Yeah, I would say probably joining a group is a good way to get over that fear of being noticed.
It
You know,
is, it is. And I'm one of the mentors for the Plein Air Painters of Chicago. So that's a really good group to get into. You don't even have to live in Chicago to be a member of that. It's $60 a year. You could join online and you get a lot of the benefits of teaching and mentoring via Facebook, via websites. Look for groups within your community to kind of band together and just support each other. That's one of the ways to get that fear of producing and performing
Mhm.
kind of on stage in plein air. One technique I would say, if you do want to do plein air painting, is just go in your backyard, and there's arts really to be found anywhere and everywhere. Intricate designs of leaves and trees and shapes. Even looking outside your window, I consider plein air painting
Yeah.
because you're working with natural light, you're working with that moving light, and you have limited time to really capture that moment. And
Mhm.
that's one of the biggest challenges of plein air painting is working quickly within that light window. You have
Mhm.
about only about an hour, maybe 2 hours max before the light really changes.
So, and that really affects your approach, like between painting in the studio or painting plein air. Yeah,
Exactly.
places. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mentioned the Cedarburg event for Cedarburg, Wisconsin is the event, and they have about 150 artists every year that comes together in this quaint little town north of Milwaukee, and we paint for 1 week, and we build relationships and connections with other artists up there, and these events are just magic. You get enough ideas, enough fuel for the rest of the year until that event happens again. So
There's a group in our area. We live about 5 hours north of Jasper National Park. And so there's a group in our area that twice a year they would go and do 10 days of painting in Jasper. I've never been able to make it yet. It's always been kids and, life. But it's amazing to think about that long, uninterrupted stretch of time traveling around this beautiful national park and just painting freely.
Yeah.
They've had some real challenges with weather, and they've done this enough that I think they're pretty hardcore. September, you can't guarantee it's not going to be snowing on you. Yeah, it's an adventure. We use a phrase. I wanted to ask you about this because I've been following you on Facebook, and I often see you sharing different things about mindset when it comes to painting. Here in my community, we use the term heart-led to kind of talk about our goals as artists. And I wondered, just hearing that phrase for you, what does it make you think of, or how would you define that for yourself?
That's a great question. I would say that everybody painting, every person in the world has been given a spirit, and that spirit within them is really connected to the creator one way or the other. Being a Christian myself, I feel my quiet time in the morning spent right in that chair right there with a nice cup of coffee and the good book really gives and sets the tone for the whole day. It's giving back a portion of my time to God and really feeding that spirit within me, the Holy Spirit, and really gives me momentum for the tasks ahead in that day.
Mm.
That's a sacred time for me. It's that's where I read, write, and make those connections. It's some people call it a miracle morning. It's that time alone. Having said that, that's the connection that kind of I look for in my art. I look for in connections when I make art. We often talk of lights within our paintings, especially plein air painting. There's really one main source of light, and which is that sun.
Mhm.
A lot of people forget that there's this cool lights of the sky that's affecting the shadow, but rarely are you ever experience that third light source is really the light source from within us. And that spirit-led painting that you talk about is really that third light source, that Holy Spirit energy coming out of you,
Mhm.
affecting every brushstroke, affecting every shape within your painting. And it's affecting the design of the overall painting. It's affecting everything about it. And a lot of people miss that third light source. You know, we have the sun, we have the blue sky of the second light source, but that third light source is, I think, what you are mentioning about the spirit led.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to teach technical, look for that outer light, but how do you let that inner light out? It's just not something that we stress in life. You're so often thinking about tangibles or responsibilities and
Yeah. And again, the way God wired me up is I get really excited when I see connections made. And I try to, not just in networking people, I get really excited about that, but I get even within the scene itself, there's connections of shapes to one another that are equally exciting to me. And those connections are really what tells the story, the deeper story within that scene. The painting that you have that I did, I titled Rocky Mountain Courage,
Mm.
because it was a scene that captured a story for me, in that here I was, this painfully shy little boy, kind of taking the risk with courage to step out into the light. And I personified that warm cluster of tree shapes in the snow getting the full light of the sun as myself. I was personifying that shape, that color as myself within that story, up against the dark shadow of the Rocky Mountain boulders. And you have to look for your story within your scenes. That
Do you so now I have to ask, is that something you think about as before you go into the painting, or is that something that comes out as you look at it after?
I like to approach these scenes with many more questions than I have answers for. You know, I'll ask myself, why am I attracted to this shape, this light source, this edge? What's this scene telling me? And all those why questions lead up to maybe not a complete story, but maybe an impression that hey, there's something in here that's more important than just the scene itself.
Mhm.
There's emotion that's involved. There's certainly awareness. So I'll use the acronym IDEAS, IDEAS, to kind of lead my thinking down the right path. The is intent. Why am I painting this scene to begin with? And it's kind of answering those questions that kind of give me those thoughts and awarenesses that help me make those right choices. The D is design. You have to have a good design within your scene to really capture that scene. You and I, as artists, we all as artists have this license to change that design. We're not copyists so much as artists.
Mhm.
So we have that power to change the design if it's not working.
Well, and one thing I noticed with the painting that I have is it's not the only version you've done of that. You have studies and you have a version I think that you did in oils as well. So
Yes,
it's a subject you've explored, in different ways and subtle variations.
yes. And again, working it in different mediums, whether
Mhm.
it's just pencil, colored pencil, charcoal. I have gouache, pastel we use often, watercolor, and oil paint. It's,
Mhm.
the medium isn't as important as the act of actually putting something marks down on a paper. Let me finish the ideas, the
Yeah,
acronym ideas.
only at id, so.
So E is emotion, the emotion that you're drawing out from within you to laying those marks down on the paper. Make sure you're aware, which is the A, awareness of all those shapes that you're making. You may not have the right words to say to capture that emotion at the time, but just make sure you're aware of that's happening. And then S is simplicity. We often get too complex when we're making art. We see our eyes are beautiful instruments and tools that God gave us to see and create with, but we want to recreate what we're seeing and not really think about how all that little detail is affecting the overall painting.
Mhm.
So simplicity is a really good word to have in mind as far as 80% of that painting really doesn't have to have all the detail that is required to tell that story.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and the really skilled artists are the ones who can make a simple painting powerful. I find too that with exploring different media, that can help me simplify as well. If I'm maybe a little more awkward in one, or if I'm using a pencil, then I don't have the ability to use color, so I have to focus on value. And so it helps me break down the scene, trying out
yeah.
those different forms of expression. Mhm. You have a little demo for us, and I would love to see that if you want to
Yeah.
share that with us.
Yes, yes. Let me go through a little exercise I do for my class, my watercolor class, in helping them understand forms, planes, and shapes on trees. I love doing a little tree demo. And again, it's a real quick exercise, maybe 10, 15 minutes, but it really helps visually capture what you have in your mind when you're painting. And it's really, the emphasis is all on light hitting a form and what that shape looks like in three dimensionality. So let me get my planer gear set up and we'll get going. This is my planer equipment.
Mhm.
It's got oil paint on it right now, but I use it also for watercolor painting. And here I just want to show a quick little demo I do in my watercolor class at the palette and chisel about trees. When we have one class is all about trees, understanding and painting various forms of trees. And I first tell them about when we want to paint anything, we want to understand the form of that thing.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't want to see you thinking, okay, I'm painting a tree. This tree has many leaves. I gotta stipple in all those leaves, and it's just gonna drive you nuts. Whereas if you break down that complex object into its simple primitive form, it gets really easy. The light source is critically important to have. let's have a light source coming in this way. So the bright spot on the tree, again, the primitive shape of this tree is a sphere. The sphere has a highlight with the light coming this way. You're going to get the nice highlight right there. And I teach them by just painting a sphere. Okay, you're going to get that termination of the shadow of the light, and then the core shadow becomes there, and then you get that the deep dark shadow, and then there's going to be a reflected light over on this side. And John Carlson, in his book on landscape painting, he talks about the edges of trees are going to have this blue cast of light right around the edges of those trees. And it's the leaf turning up toward the light and receiving that blue edge to that tree. And as soon as you talk about that to the students, they start seeing it in real life. And of course, we're using photographs to paint from in class. And if there was either a brown, warm, earthy shapes down in here, you're going to get that reflected light of warmth underneath the ball, underneath that sphere. So light coming, hitting the ground, bouncing back up into the ball. You're going to get a nice warm glow. You're going to get that core shadow right in there. And then I call these my popsicle trees. I like using purple. It's a color called either quinacridone purple, it's a beautiful color, or rose of ultramarine.
Oh yeah, I'd love that one too. I always feel like there was a stage in my life where all of a sudden everything that I thought was brown turned purple. It was like my eyes suddenly became sensitive to that color. And of course, brown is always a mix of other colors, it's never just brown.
Absolutely. So I get each of my students to paint this a couple of times as they go, because I want it ingrained in their head that when they paint a tree, they can paint it, of course, abstractly. You've got the umbrella like canopy shapes, but in their head they have the 3D form.
Well, and when you simplify it down that way, I mean, you were painting a tennis ball and then it turned into a tree, and we see a tree. Somehow we hold ourselves to very high standards when we're painting, that it has to look like the photo. But to be able to simplify and abstract it gives us that ability to symbolize what we're seeing.
Exactly.
And getting the light correct is a big part of that.
So everything that's in the shadow as this tree is turning, everything in the shadow is going to be dark. Yeah, in real life, there's going to be light coming through a couple of trees and hit a single leaf that's over here and you see it. But for this, simplify. I'm going to hit it with this blue light up the very top on the edge. I'm going to soften up that edge as I go with a little bit of water and blend that in, and then come in with the shadows of the tree trunks. Where you have sky holes, typically the branches are going to be within those dark areas, of course. But because I did this first, it's in my head, this becomes more real because I have this already, in my head. So this is a quick little exercise that you could do in your classes, as well as just to reemphasize the complexity of a tree in its primitive shape is all it is a sphere. And the
Mm,
same thing if you're doing, evergreen trees. The primitive shape is a cone, you
yeah.
know.
So
The
you feel
light's
that
light coming
roundedness.
like this, but you have that dark shadow over here. So when you do a real tree, this is this primitive shape in three dimensionality is really what you're painting.
Mhm.
And the choices that you make up here is because you've done the homework on this one. Same thing with palm trees, any kind of shape for that matter, really comes down to the simplicity of the how primitive that form can be.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like too in nature. I mean, so many things are those rounded shapes. We're not dealing with, you start thinking about squares and rectangles where you have those sharp angles. We see that in architecture, but we don't see it nearly as much in nature.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's there. The shapes are there.
Mhm.
They're just covered in so much detail that us as humans see that detail first, but as artists, that's why they tell us to squint.
Yes.
Squinting kind of takes that whole thing out. I've been blessed with perfect vision.
Same.
I take my glasses off, I see everything in a nice Gaussian blur.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, small advantages. Yeah, and I think too, often as a teacher, if you're working with especially newer painters, they'll say, okay, how do I paint water and how do I paint trees? And at the end of the day, it's if you can paint this shape or if you can learn to see where the patterns where the light falls, you can paint anything. So, just focus on
Exactly.
that one thing.
Yep.
So even just knowing how to paint a sphere is going to take you into a lot of different subjects.
Oh yeah. And what are the other shapes that we mainly paint?
Mhm,
Are planes,
mhm.
flat planes, upright planes. The sky is a dome, more or
Yeah.
less a plane that goes over our head and up to the horizon.
Mhm.
You know, the clouds within those that shape get bigger and bigger as they get closer and closer, smaller and smaller as they get further and further. And the
Mhm.
more realistic that you can paint those shapes, understanding the three-dimensional forms and the colors, the graying of those colors that as that shape recedes,
Mhm.
the better your painting is going to be.
Well, and that's one reason plein air painting is so good too, because it does bring you that opportunity to sharpen your observation skills right there.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for this demo. I mean, I think it's such a great example of learning how to see the overall shape. It's a brain training thing, I think, as well. I know for some of our students, we've got a number who are just getting into watercolor. They're learning the basic. It can feel like whenever I cut my husband's hair and I'm all hands and I don't know how to hold the scissors, I'm still no good at it, but it feels so awkward and it feels kind of counter to what we know how to do. But it's practice. It's just coming out, showing up and learning to look.
And the majority of my students, I'll say everyone is different, but the majority of the patterns I see are people aren't using enough water,
Mhm.
and they'll go in and paint too dry, and it shows in their painting. If they just have twice as much water and take away 50% of the brush work.
Yeah. Well, and bringing in that extra water gives you a little more time often to
Oh yeah, yeah,
dry. So then you
yeah.
can pause and look. And we were just talking before the broadcast about Makoto Fujimura, and probably pronouncing that wrong, but he has a video called Slow Art, which I thought, that's a great phrase for maybe what we want to bring into the studio if we're thinking about our creative mental health is just that ability to slow down a little bit
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, be present in the painting. Actually, and I was thinking about that when you were talking about your quiet time in the morning. That starting the day with just being in that space and being present there. To me, I want to bring that kind of same pause and intentionality into my painting. So, if I can learn how to discipline myself to make that morning practice, maybe I can bring a sense of understanding of that connectedness to my studio as well.
yeah. You got it. I think
Yeah.
that's a good practice to get into, you know,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
first hour and give it away, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. True. With the three kids at home, I feel like I'm giving my time away quite a lot to them, but then to come into my space and give it away for me, yeah, that's a big thought. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are just going to wrap up here, and I want to thank you again. One question I had that I was just thinking of as we talk about this is artists, especially new painters, I think we really, really want to know our art is good. So to just come and show up and paint something for the discipline or that little bit of training, we're always looking for somebody to kind of approve of what we're doing. How do you set some criteria on your painting, or how do you let go of that, and learn how to kind of pause in that moment instead of always standing there with that judgmental eye? Maybe you'll have an insight for us.
Oh, another great question.
Yeah, the hardest one right at the end, hey?
I think there's a benefit to being your own best critic. I think you mention this quite often, and being your own best artist. But you also need to be your own best critic in replacing that, I'll call it evil voice in your head, telling you, oh, you're no good. What are you doing? You have more important things, And again, quieting that down
Mhm.
and filling it up with all the positive stuff. One of the challenges I have my students give me is list their goals. And typically the goals come back. I want to have less fear. I don't want to have that fear of ridicule. And I tell them, let's flip that around. Let's, instead of asking for less fear, set that goal up as having more courage, more bravery with each brushstroke. It just turns that whole thing around and says, I can be courageous and
Mhm.
I can go out there, even though every brushstroke may not be exactly perfect. I'm laying that brushstroke down with confidence,
Mhm.
and that confidence actually translates so much better to the viewer, to you yourself. I would say, to get back to your question, make sure the critic that's in your head is feeding you the right information.
Mhm.
Allow that good voice to come out and start encouraging you, and just listen to that voice and starve the other voice.
Yeah, yeah, I really like to think about wanting to be in the studio with my best friend,
Yeah,
Well, if my best friend was standing beside me in the studio, don't I want to be that person to myself and give that kind of feedback that someone who really likes you and thinks you're just fine, is going to share. So that's something I
absolutely.
like to do, is just imagine that. Yeah, me coming into the studio with my best friend, biggest fan, a really good coach, learn how to be that to myself.
Yeah, I had the fortunate blessing in my life to have had really good teachers,
Mhm.
and I have their voices in my head.
Mhm.
I'm sure hundreds, if not thousands, of students have you in their head as they start laying their brushes on their paper, because you're a really good coach and you're a really good encouraging teacher. And that's part of building that positive voice within you. I have my oil painting teacher, Eugene Hall, in my voice. He's been dead since 1985, but I still have him in my
Mhm.
head every time I go lay a brushstroke down.
Mhm.
I have my watercolor painting teacher, Irving Shapiro, the American Academy of Art, telling me, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. And I would say 20 other people in my art career that have just
Mhm.
fed into me positive
Mhm.
reinforcement. And in books, in videos, in real life workshops, anything and everything you can get your hand on. Your classes are amazing. So,
Yeah, I really think, yeah, there is so much out there to encourage an artist. When you see another artist who's willing to persist in making their most authentic work, I think there's something that's empowering about that as well. So, then it feels like you're part of, you're a host of people who understand what the pursuit is, and what the goals are. So, it's not just status or perfection, but we are looking for something that rings true for us. So yeah,
Yeah.
and there's this pairing of wanting to grow your skill and wanting that fullness of expression. So and
Exactly.
it's exciting when you start to see little glimmers of that happen. Why wouldn't we want to nurture that along?
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I've learned is that it takes nothing from any other artist. If I see a student work and tell them it's beautiful, that there's strengths in that painting, it doesn't take anything away from anybody else who's gotten similar praise from me, you know? It's something we can give freely and just keep building. For me, I believe in building on those strengths and looking for those. That's a much better way to build a painting than that voice of criticism that wants to show you everything that's wrong with your painting. So
There's no better feeling in the world, really, than seeing one of your students succeeding. And
mhm.
I have a number of palette and chisel watercolor students that have gone on and competed and have won awards. They've won recognition, and it's just no better feeling than that. So keep at it. It pays huge dividends in the future.
Yeah. Now, Steve, I'm sure that there are students who are in your area or where somewhere you're going to be to teach a workshop that would love to study with you. Where would they find info on your classes?
I have all my workshop information is on my website at steveputtrich.com.
I will
It's
link that down below our video
okay.
here as well. So yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to share this with my students. I've admired your work for a long time. Every time I look at your painting on my wall, it makes my day.
Um,
Still,
you.
there's still those little moments of color and different parts that are my favorite. And, art does that. When you have original art on your wall, there's a life to it you get that makes it almost new every day. So I just
Yeah.
thank you for that. For
Thank
sharing
you,
your
Ann.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I've linked up down below the video, links to some of the things we talked about today, to Steve's website, and also I think I'll link up the Chicago Plein Air group that you mentioned as well. So anybody who's in that area. And if you're not in Chicago area, you can join that group online or look up a plein air group in your own community. They're sprouting up all over the world, and they are a really good place to connect with other artists. If you're just new to painting and you're a little intimidated by connecting with artists in person because you think they're all going to be better than you, I would really encourage you to seek out an arts group in your community. By and large, what I have found is there is a sense of family and community there, of all learning together, that is really welcoming and doesn't discriminate towards beginners. It's the very rare group that has kind of that closed-mindedness. So I would encourage you to seek that out so that you can enjoy that sense of family and grow together with an arts group where you live. So thank you, Steve. I want to wish you all the best as well, and especially for your workshops coming up in the future, and for your online ventures as well. I know it's been a real challenge for so many artists to learn how to navigate teaching online, but it's also opening up some great opportunities that I'm excited about
Thanks, Ann.
for our students as well. To be able to offer this diversity of content is really, really good. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye for now.